The bearish fair value gap is a pattern where the lower shadow of the first candle doesn't overlap with the upper shadow of the third candle, creating a gap between the two. Let's make a quick comparison between three candle patterns where we can find a fair value gap and one where we cannot. On the left, we can see that there is no overlap between the lower shadow of the first candle and the upper shadow of the third candle, therefore creating a fair value gap. On the right, we can see that the lower shadow of the first candle overlaps with the upper shadow of the third candle. In this case, there is no fair value gap. Another important detail about fair value gaps is the idea of consequent encroachment, which is simply a fancy expression that means the midpoint of the fair value gap or the 50% retracement of the gap. Fair value gaps can be used as zones of support and resistance. As is the case with many other types of support and resistance, it's important to pay attention to how price reacts to fair value gap limits and the consequent encroachment line. Let's look at BCs, or bullish fair value gaps, first. The ideal scenario is to see price reacting to the upper limit of the fair value gap, meaning piercing it and closing above it. That's one way of knowing that price is respecting the fair value gap. Another valid way is to observe the same type of reaction at the consequent encroachment. Price will pierce the midpoint of the fair value gap and close above it, quite often testing the consequent encroachment again right after it, although that is certainly not a requirement. In this other illustration, you can see the bearish version of the fair value gap reversal. The principle is the same, of course, but everything is flipped upside down. As it is the case with other types of support and resistance, price can disrespect the fair value gap and test it on the other side. In ICT terms, this is called a fair value gap inversion. Here on the left, you can see a hypothetical example of the bullish fair value gap inversion leading to a bearish movement. And on the right, you can see a bearish fair value gap inversion leading to a